Hi, the Sound of Niagara podcast. I am here with an old friend, Pat Billoni, and we're going to talk about life and his experience. I mean, listen, if you're from Western New York or even Southern Ontario and you're a fan of sports and the region's history, this is going to be a treat. And I've known him for years at this point. And, you know, we were talking, and I said, why don't you come on the podcast and tell your story? And I think it's beneficial to a lot of people. It delves into mental health. It delves into the history of the region. It delves into the history of the newspapers in Western New York and the decline of newspapers in Western New York. I mean, Pat has quite a tale to tell. So here we go. A little music to start things off. How are you, Pat? You're on.
All right, Nate. Let's get a couple things straight here first.
Go ahead.
The guest in this chair is Mike Billoni.
What did I say?
Mike Billoni, and then Pat. And the reason, listeners, the reason he said Pat is that we have a mutual friend, Pat, who Nate has been trying to get on this air forever, and it literally took us 2 seconds to make that connection.
Mike, listen.
There we go.
Listen,
it's Mike.
Before I
and
go
you're Nate, right?
Yes.
All right.
Listen, I obviously know who you are. I often call my kids by the wrong names. I'm one of those type of people. I know I was in politics.
There's doctors for that.
Yeah. Politicians are supposed to know everybody's name. I know your story. I knew your story didn't I?
There's another misstatement on your end.
Go ahead.
You referred yourself as a politician.
Mm-hmm.
I never considered you, nor did our mutual friend Pat Whalen consider you a politician. You were a visionary community leader who stepped into the office of supervisor with great visions for this community.
Wow.
But the politics got in the way.
Well, listen, I think it's a great honor from you. And I'm still trying to stay involved in the community and to talk about the things I care about. That's why I do this podcast. And listen, I know your story, and it's an incredible story, and you're an incredible storyteller, and you have a incredible voice. Can I just do a little bit more of an introduction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now that you know who I am.
I'm keeping all that in there because it is very characteristic of my personality, and yours as well. So, Mike, listen, I knew him when I was supervisor. He reached out. He cared about the tolls on the island. He's an island resident, Grand Island resident. But it wasn't just that. We talked about so many things together. Mike, I don't even know where to begin. Let's begin at the beginning. Let's begin at when you started off at the Tonawanda News, correct?
Well, really, before that, I grew up was born, second generation Italian, born on the west side of Buffalo. And we moved to Kenmore because my dad worked for his brother as the home delivery man for Colvin Cleaners. And I was doing that as a young kid. But then when I was the summer of my freshman year at Cardinal O'Hara High School, our Little League baseball team won everything. And we would turn in the scores at the rec department and put one sentence in for the result. I added it up, and I became a correspondent for the Tonawanda News when I was a sophomore in high school.
So you're very much, and don't take this the wrong way, you're from you represent a Buffalo that is kind of disappearing. And I'm not trying to imply anything about you disappearing. Hopefully you're here forever. But you're from that era very much where the Catholic Church was a huge part of our community, where people I just wrote a tribute to John LaFalls.
Yep. And
you are kind of his generation in some sense, because you guys were very much trained in the ways of the Catholic Church and the traditions of the Catholic fathers and the discipline that was involved in that. Speak to that for a second, because I think that's sort of version of Buffalo has faded, unfortunately.
Sadly, you're right. But yeah, I'd say if you were to, hit where my genesis is, it would definitely be about, that upbringing as a Roman Catholic. Under my mom, grew up during the Depression. The church, for them, it was Holy Cross on the Old West Side, was their central gathering point. For us, I was baptized, and my early years were around Holy Angels Church on Porter Avenue. Ended up being married there, almost 19 years ago. And the irony is that this is Holy Week, and the pastor of that church, who was a dear friend of mine, grew up on the West Side, Father Tony Rigoli, is an oblate, and he now is in New Orleans at Our Lady of Guadalupe parish, and I'm leaving Wednesday to spend Holy Week and Easter with him.
Wow, it's amazing. And so you kind of fell into this thing where you like sports, and it was also baseball was huge back then. Boxing was huge too, right?
Yeah, everything was going back to, as I was growing up. I have fond memories of going with my dad and my brothers on the NFT bus. We would park on Main and Kenmore, take the bus to Main and Dodge Street, and walk down to the old War Memorial Stadium to watch Jack Kemp and Cookie Gilchrist and the Buffalo Bills, when really the only time they won a league championship was the 65-66 AFL championships.
What was it like watching the Bills play in the city of Buffalo at the Rock Pile? It must have been kind of amazing.
For a little kid, I think as like 11 or 12 years old, really one of the things that my parents, especially my mom, always brought us up on was treat everyone like you'd like to be treated. We had a dry cleaner, so we had people of all ethnic diversity working for us. So for me, seeing someone who was black or Chinese or from different countries, it was no big deal. Back then, the company was so small, they would come over and have dinner at our houses. So for me, I never really equated anyone because of their skin color, their religious background, or anything. I just, if their blood was red, we were pales.
So you're touching on something I didn't even mean to get to, but basically even back then the stadium, which is now some sort of community center. I can't remember the name.
Johnny B. Wiley Amateur Athletic Facility, which I've got something in the works for there.
But it's in the heart of the black community of Buffalo, and it was, and it's kind of sad that that area, to me, and I've said it many times, that area lost the Bills.
Oh, well, number one, there's no way that the NFL could have survived in that stadium. It was, it just didn't have the amenities. However, I totally blame the Buffalo News for keeping it away from where it should have been, and that was the Crossroads downtown Buffalo.
Yes, and there was a massive project from the guys who made the Astrodome. I mean, this is all lost history. It's great to talk about this. I want to get back to you, but they wanted to build a dome stadium there, right?
Well, no,
right?
They wanted to build a dome stadium in Lancaster after the Buffalo News won out in the battle. It was really funny. There's great articles. In fact, a friend of mine, Paul Rinaldo, his dad was Phil Rinaldo, the legendary sports columnist of the Courier, who I had the pleasure of working with for a few years before the paper closed. He took the stand of being downtown, and Steve Weller from the News took the stand of moving to the suburbs.
But so there was a fight, and there's the one group wanted to put it in Lancaster, where there's more space, and one group wanted to put it in downtown, where the Crossroads area is kind of where the current hockey stadium is,
Correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening is it moved to Orchard Park, which, I'm not trying to diss Orchard Park, but it is literally the whitest community in all of Western New York. So it went from someplace that was the heart of the, historical and cultural center of black identity in Buffalo, and in many ways the identity of the city of Buffalo, and it moved to the suburbs, in the white suburbs, right? And it's been there ever since.
Yeah, now it's going to be there until they finally leave or whatever they do.
Right.
And building a multi-billion-dollar, playpen for 10 games a year.
So wait, I didn't mean to get in all this, but listen, I fought this fight, and many other friends of mine fought this fight, and I felt very much vilified, because I'm like, wait, you're going to give $1 billion to one of the most successful financial institution in all of Western New York, and you're going to build a stadium that's right across the street from the existing stadium. And people are like, oh, you're a hater. You don't like the Bills. I mean, who doesn't like the Bills? I love the Bills, but it just didn't make sense for our community. It almost was like even the leaders like Byron Brown and the leaders of the city of Buffalo were basically saying the city of Buffalo doesn't matter. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Nate, that you are opening up a huge can. But
I didn't mean to. This is what happens on this podcast.
But see, the problem is that you're talking common sense.
Yeah.
How about going to here's the other fight that I lost because of allegedly Kim Pagula originally wanted the stadium where the Perry Projects are. Now, if you go by the 190 and see where the old Perry Projects, I'm glad my prayers have been answered that they knocked down those tall, horrible living conditions for that community, and now they're building some really nice.
It looks nice. We'll
homes.
see. I think.
You're right.
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. We'll see, but I hope it's better. I think Rick James grew up over there, didn't he?
He grew up in one of the projects.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I've seen the video of him visiting home and visiting the small house that he grew up in. And it's kind of amazing, by the way, speaking of Orchard Park, he ended up moving to Orchard Park too, didn't he?
Jewett Homewood Road.
Yeah, and the house is still there.
Yep, that was a classic home.
Yeah, and he had some type of pool in there that he had, like an indoor pool. Yeah, and I've heard some stories about Eddie Murphy going.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to you. So Mike my family used to read your column in the Tonawanda News. I grew up in North Tonawanda. And this is when the Tonawanda News was a real paper, and it was very important. So you wrote there for how long?
Well, I began when I was in high school in 1970 at Cardinal O'Hara, and I'm probably a quadruple A personality. So they said you could write about O'Hara, and that's one game a week. So I did that for a week, and then they said, well, I'm open on this day. How about covering another team? So before I knew it, I was doing a whole lot of freelance stuff right up through my end of my high school career. Then went on and studied journalism in college, and the Tonawanda News offered me a full-time job at 19 years old when I graduated with an associate's degree, and said, well, I'll finish my bachelor's at night, which I haven't, but I will at some point.
So you're this kid who grew up in Kenmore. Your family has this business, this dry cleaning business, Italians. And I bring that up because I think there was when you were growing up, there was still discrimination against Italians. Even though we had a strong Italian community, there was a lot of I've talked to people all across the region who were Italian or of Italian heritage who faced extreme discrimination. Did you?
I would hear the remarks almost like the N word for blacks.
Right.
They had the D word for Italians. So a lot of my black friends, I would say, look, I understand the prejudice to you. Let me tell you what my father and his friends, first generation over from Italy, experienced back then. Back then, the Irish was really fighting from South Buffalo to the west side.
Right.
It was pretty ugly, according to my dad. But then my uncle, who founded Colvin Cleaners 94 years ago, when he moved them from Colvin Boulevard into Kenmore in 1941, never changed the name, kept it as Colvin Cleaners. It took several years before any Kenmore resident became a customer, because back then it was German, Hungarian, Polish, and they literally did not frequent any business that was owned by someone from the Mediterranean.
This is when I always say there's one race, the human race, and I really hate. I mean, celebrate your traditions and your culture, but we are all one people, obviously.
I throw it up. I go on social media much like you used to when you used to be pretty frequent on there, and I'll often throw up that my mom and dad grew up in the Depression. We learned how to get by with very little. My brother, people now go to Colvin Cleaners, and he's got 3 or 4 companies under the umbrella. He's labored there so hard over the last 48 years, and now his 2 kids are involved, and the business is flourishing. And now they say, oh, wow, you've got it made. He said, here, let me tell you about BM. What's BM? Before money. And how we really had a struggle to get there. And it's really the American dream of, working really hard. And but my parents taught us always give back to those who need it and treat everyone like you'd like to be treated. And I'd put up on social media, I said, can you imagine today? Let's take today and let's just take your school or your community, forget the whole world, and have everybody in that school or in that town of Grand Island treat everyone like you'd like to be treated.
Well, I just to your comments here, I remember growing up, and I grew up later than you did, but I grew up and there was discrimination even when I was a kid. I remember, my last name's McMurray, and I had family members. I remember I had a family member, I'm not going to name them, but a distant family member who said to me, don't date Italian girls. And I was like, they're the prettiest girls in the school. And they wouldn't, but she didn't want me to date an Italian girl in high school. There was still that lingering discrimination. It was very faint, but it was still lingering. But now you go to those communities where I grew up, and you can't tell which is an Irish community or a Polish community or a Italian community. It's like basically it's all white people, right? And I think it does illustrate how these barriers, these artificial barriers, do break down over time. But I have spoken to many people who were affected by serious discrimination among different European groups.
I'll bring up a current one, and my late wife Debbie, who just adored you as supervisor of Grand Island, because Debbie was tough as nails, and she liked you because you would speak the truth, and then I'll never forget the one meeting you had, and Jim Sharp was in there. I think it was like your second or third day in office, and you knew that you were going to do a long-range plan, have it redusted off and done again for the town, and told Jim, here, put Debbie on there, regardless of what her affiliation was, just because she's the type of visionary that we want. And one of the great moments I had with her was when she worked for the International Institute as their CFO. And one of her duties was, you hear all this terminology now about, refugees coming into town. Back then, there were so many coming here, but they were vetted by the federal government. And they would come here, and the International Institute would greet them, and Debbie would have a check and money and bring them to the West Side, find them a home, and get them started in business. And it was wonderful meeting these people.
Well, maybe we can touch on some of those national issues if you'd like. But I think I am proud for what you're saying. First of all, your wife was a lovely person, and I was proud to put her on a committee. And we did get a long-range planning committee put together, and we created a long-range plan. I think that I have this reputation in Western New York among people who don't know me as like I am this fierce partisan and I hate. But most of the people I know, I ran a town that is Republican. And it was impossible to run the town without working with Republicans. It's not like I hate Republicans. I am very troubled by what's happening in the country right now. But these are my friends and my family. And, I ran for Congress in a place where it was the reddest district arguably in the country. And many hundreds of thousands of people literally that were Republicans voted for me. So, it is difficult for me to think about the divisions and the way people get labeled. But what I am more than anything is I'm a common sense person. And putting her on that committee was just common sense. She was a smart person who was committed. I was like, why wouldn't I do this? But before, let's stick on you.
Yep.
So you're a big guy too. So you're this big guy. Did you play sports or you just watch sports? Because you're like, you look like you could be a boxer or something. Like you could be like a baby Joe Macy or something. Did you only enjoy watching it or did you play sports?
I played. But because I'm sort of big boned and
you're huge. You're a giant. Go ahead.
I hated running and I didn't run very well, so I didn't.
I see.
And I also couldn't hit a curveball. So when the Tonawanda News gave me the opportunity to write about it, I weighed my options and said, "Look, I'm not going anywhere as a great athlete." So I began writing about it. But I love sports and still love to play. Whatever I can, out there.
Did you cover the I have this flyer up here, or this banner up here, the North Tonawanda or the Buffalo Norseman, and nobody knows. I was shocked you knew what it was because no one knows what that is, and that's almost a lost artifact at this point. Talk about the Norsemen.
Well, they were in the North American Hockey League, which was you have the Sabres in the NHL, then you have the American Hockey League. And then this was one level below that. And one of the original executives with the Sabres under Punch Imlach and Seymour Nordy Knox was a fellow named Fred Hunt. And his son, Fred Hunt Jr., still loved to play. So he ended up playing with this team. And it was in North Tonawanda. They played on Payne Avenue in the old hockey arena, where then the Sabres, practiced after that.
So what's it called? Rec Center or something like that?
I don't know what it is
Sport,
today.
it
used to be called Sports Center.
Yeah, something like that.
There were 2 rinks. But the neat part is I covered that team. It was North Tonawanda's, sort of professional hockey team. And 2 interesting things is, one game they had a team called the Beauce Jarros. And they were from Beauce, Quebec, and they would bus in here, and they were just nothing but goons. And so they're fighting and doing all this stuff, and I'm coming down the stairs of the press box, and they're skating or going up the stairs, like at the start of the 3rd period, and I yell out to one of the guys who was, just an ultimate goon and been in 2 or 3 fights, and he comes over to the glass, and he hits me with his stick, and they call the police. They have him arrested for assault, and all of a sudden, here I am as a sports writer becoming the story.
So I didn't know that. I heard that this team, that in the fights they had, was the inspiration for the movie Slapshot.
Well, it wasn't Beauce as much, but it was the fights in that league. And ironically, the Norsemen played in Johnstown, Pennsylvania in the playoffs. So it was like this time of the year. And I remember flying down there with Dr. Dudley Turecki, was one of the owners. And we got there late. And so I'm going up the stairs, and they were going to film the movie The Slapshot right there in Johnstown and use a number of the players of the Johnstown Jets for the team, that is the team in Slapshot. So as I'm going up the stairs, I'm like, wow, a whole lot of people here, and I can't believe all these women that are here at this hockey game. I go, the press box jam-packed, I'm looking around. I open up like one of the radio booths. There's 1 seat in there and 1 other person. I said, could I sit here? Yeah, mumbles. So I sit, I'm watching the game, and don't even see who's next to me. And the game is a boring first period. And he's swearing like, they're supposed to fight this. I'm like, oh, okay. He looks at me, he says, all right, big guy. So there's your size.
Yeah, right.
He goes, I need you to take me to the locker room. It was Paul Newman.
Holy cow.
And he said,
you're the bodyguard for him?
Don't stop. And so we run down, get to the locker room. I'm on the outside. He's in there telling those guys, obviously, if you want to be in this movie, you better show me some fighting.
Wow.
I bring them back up, start a 2nd period. The Norsemen are out circling around. Here comes Johnstown. They start fighting before the pucks even drop.
So there was some truth to the story that this league and these teams were the inspiration for Slapshot. Then.
Absolutely.
So wait, you're telling where was this game held?
Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Wow, you drove down there and you saw Paul Newman. Wow, amazing story. Let's get to some more amazing stories. You guys, keep listening. If you're listening to this, keep listening, because this guy has some. If you care about Buffalo, he is a treasure trove of information about Western New York and Buffalo. And that's one of the reasons why I always love talking to him. So all right, Mike. Then you're going to leave the Tonawanda News, and you're going to go to the Courier-Express, correct?
Yes.
And so the Courier-Express, for those who do not know, was a newspaper, a popular newspaper, very popular. It was a rival to the Buffalo News. We had 2 newspapers in this town. Now we barely have one. It's printed in Cleveland. The Tonawanda News went on to fail. I guess it's part of what? There's something called the Sentinel now. And it's like a conglomeration of like 15 different cities. It's a little local newspaper. It's mostly advertisements.
Oh, God, I have no idea what it's even.
We also lost the Grand Island paper, right? The Dispatch is gone, right?
Well,
kind of.
It's merged with the Sentinel, and it still comes out weekly, and it's sort of community owned. It's employee owned, and he's doing his best to try to keep it
going.
Keep it going.
Who's the boss there? Who's controlling it?
There's a whole team. Sadly, the former publisher Skip Mazanower passed away, and now Josh Maloney, the managing editor, is overseeing.
I had no idea Skip passed away.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a hard guy to deal with too sometimes. He's a tough guy. All right, so. But, obviously he was a local newspaper guy. He was doing it for years. You got to give him credit for that. All right. So give me a second. Ooh, 1 second. So then you went on and you moved on to To do what? You went on to move to?
Well, at the Courier, I was recruited there for the summer of late summer of 1977, after the blizzard had been here earlier that year, and I was working with. I was covering sports, high school sports, amateur, and then slowly worked my way into being the number 2 person on the Sabres and number 3 on the Bills beat, and that was the time of Joe Ferguson, and the Buffalo Braves were around at that time.
For people who don't know, the Braves were a huge deal, right, Mike?
Yep. And I was supposed to cover them. The year that I had that beat was the year that Paul Snyder ended up selling them, and they ended up moving and became eventually the LA Clippers.
Yes, and it was a scam deal where the guy who owned the Celtics couldn't sell the Celtics, so he traded ownership with the Braves and then sold the Braves to San Diego, I think, first, and then they moved them to Los Angeles. So, yeah, it's tragic. We had a great team. We had I got the Ernie D. Gregorio's jersey out there, signed jersey. He was like the rookie of the year at the time. And then we had, of course, the great Bob McAdoo.
Yep.
And then, of course, the incredible athlete from Buff State, Randy Smith, who had a huge vertical jump, way ahead of his time. This was a basketball town back then.
It really was. And, I think this is a sports town, and they get behind, whoever. But unfortunately, back then, they were playing in the odd.
Right.
And everyone blames the Knoxes that own the Sabres. The city owned the arena, and the Sabres were the primary tenant. But number 2 was Canisius College, and they controlled the dates. So they're second on the date list of, picking out, all right, this is my date, even before the schedule came out. And so Canisius took all the Saturday nights and like Wednesday night or Friday nights and Saturday. So it left the Braves with like Wednesdays, Tuesdays.
Right. It's hard to imagine the NBA was not that popular back then. But I remember going with my dad as almost an infant. I could still have faint memories of it. But the Braves are huge. But Canisius, Niagara, and Bonaventure.
Yep,
I mean, didn't Niagara win the national championship under Frank Layden?
No.
Oh, I thought they did. Okay,
no.
sorry.
In fact, Bonaventure could have, but then Bob Lanier got hurt in the playoffs, and they made it. I think the furthest of any of the big 3.
And none of those teams are very good anymore. I mean, Bonaventure has a season once in a while where they make the March Madness, don't they?
Correct. But now you're looking at, we could get into this. This could be a whole show in itself. I could give you a guest who could talk about this, of
the decline of basketball in Western New York?
Well, not only that, but the decline, what's happening on the bigger level with having, the paid athletes.
Oh,
and the portal
the effect
of people able to
of that.
move.
Right. Well, let's go, but let's stick with you today. We're going to talk next about... Go ahead.
Let's take a little break here. How about a trivia question on that sweatshirt you're wearing of the Hamilton Tiger Cats?
Oh, tell me. What is it?
Here's the question is, what son of a former, this is real easy, of a former Buffalo Bill was a star on that team?
I have no clue.
Very easy question.
I do not know. Tell me.
Luke Tasker, the son of
You're kidding.
Steve Tasker.
And doesn't he own Rosie's Ice Cream now in East Aurora, and there's one in Buffalo? Is that the same? Is that false information?
I don't know. That's a good. I know he's a realtor for Hunt.
Oh, I think he does. I think he does. Yeah, and Rosie's
great ice cream.
Oh man, it's great.
I gotta stay away from.
It's almost too high end for me, to be honest with you. But it's fantastic, and the design. Whoever Luke Tasker, I don't know any of the Taskers, but like Luke, you did a good job. I mean, it's gorgeous. The design and everything is gorgeous, and it's truly delicious.
All right, so let's get back to the Courier.
Yes. Sorry.
The Courier-Express, sadly, in September of 1982, the Courier and the Buffalo News were both owned in its day by local prominent business leaders.
Didn't know that.
The Connors family owned the Courier-Express, and the Butler family owned the Buffalo News. In fact, they had the Butler mansion was at the corner of North and and Delaware, and it's still there. It's now the Jacobs family bought it, became Delaware North for a little bit, and now it was donated to University of Buffalo.
Right. And it's their business and management schools in there, right?
Something is.
So okay. So you're at why did the Courier-Express fail? Because before you go into it, when I was a kid, I remember the Courier-Express being kind of the exciting paper versus the Buffalo News, the more interesting paper to read. How did it fail, or is it just part of the greater failure of all local papers? What was the reasoning?
Well, back in 1982, that was before the trend that's happening now with hedge funds owning, media and just, squeezing them as tight as they could go to maximize, revenues and profits. What happened with the Courier was the family sold, and they sold to the Minneapolis Star and Tribune. This became their second paper.
Okay.
So they owned it from Minneapolis. We had a publisher, that they would hire. It was here, and it was still run as a local, paper. I mean, they didn't control the editorial stance, and we had a strong editor, and so it was like business as usual. But it was run out of Minneapolis. Simultaneously, the Buffalo News, the Butler family, they sold to multi-billionaire Warren Buffett, the huge investor from Berkshire Hathaway, who wanted to invest in, back then, the late 70s, early 80s, investing in newspaper was like, printing money.
And so he built it up, and eventually it was sold after that, right? It was, 5 years ago it was sold, right?
Yeah.
And it was sold to Lee Industries, which is kind of a conservative conglomerate outside of, where is it? Somewhere in the Midwest.
Yeah, in Iowa, I think. But what happened was, Buffett's group looked at it. Back in that day, if you can imagine this, the Butler family and the Connors family sort of had a handshake agreement that Saturday was the big Buffalo News Day.
Wow.
With comics and all that on the Saturday afternoon, because they were primarily only an afternoon paper, and the Courier was the morning paper, and they had the Sunday morning paper that was the big paper of the week. Well, Buffett comes in, and now the Buffalo News has a morning paper, so now we're in competition.
Wild. So it collapses. Courier-Express collapses. They can't fight the money of Berkshire Hathaway, and they go out of business. And then what happens to you?
Well, everyone was scrambling at that point, and everyone obviously was running down the street to the Buffalo News, but I didn't really have a good feeling about their editor, Murray Light, at the time, and I was young. That was, 82. I was still under 30, and, said, I'm not going to go there. So I was looking for other ventures to get into when the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle called.
Oh, I didn't know that. You worked for them for a while.
They offered me a laptop and mileage and said just go and cover any local news stories and be part of the Bills coverage on Sunday, because they were looking at they were doing a wraparound of the DNC to see if they could penetrate the morning market.
Here in Buffalo.
Yeah. And that started from...
It is strange that these two cities, they kind of are sister cities, right?
Yep.
Rochester and Buffalo. But there seems to be more of a division between the two cities now than there was when I was a kid. Is that wrong to think?
I don't think they've ever really been close. They tried to get in here with that morning paper. I was like their local, guy covering it. So now we're into early 83, and January of 83, they made me an offer to go full-time they decided they're not going to do the wraparound paper anymore because Gannett was here. Gannett had just started USA Today, and that's where all their capital.
Oh yeah, and USA Today made a huge impact on a lot of local papers.
Yep.
People forget it was scary to a lot of local papers because they did it differently. It was colorful. It was easy to read, and I think people hated it at first because they thought it wasn't as intellectual as the local papers, right?
So they made me an offer that February 1, I could go to Rochester and cover the summer baseball team that was in the International League that used to play the Bisons many years ago. And then in the fall, go to Washington to be part of USA Today's NFL coverage team. So I'm all set to do that. And on the Monday, 1 week before I was going to leave, and I had already moved out of my condo and all that, they call me and say, we have a problem. You have no baseball stories in your portfolio, and there's a guy with Gannett who covered baseball, wants to move back here.
Okay.
So just get us a baseball story, and you'll be fine. So I call a source of mine, and this is a Monday, and he said, well, ironically, at that time, Buffalo had a double-A team in the Eastern League that Jimmy Griffin had brought back here that played at War Memorial Stadium. He brought them back in '79, and no one went to the games. They were losing money big time. So they were basically broke.
And we're talking about who here, so everyone knows.
This is a double-A Buffalo Bisons
Right.
back in this is January of '83.
And where do they bring them from?
Well, they played at War Memorial Stadium, and they were in the Eastern League among these small little.
But did they move from another city to here or something? Or
Yeah, from Jersey City.
Okay.
They moved here in 1979.
And they're the farm team for who?
Back then, they're the farm team, double-A team that's one level below what we have now of the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Right. And then before I get into this, what was the deal with the Muck Dogs out in Batavia? They were what?
They were part of the New York Penn League that had Niagara Falls, Jamestown. They've been around for 70, 80 years.
And they're still there in some capacity, aren't they? Or
They're there as a college team
Yeah.
in the Perfect Pitch League, and it's college players. But Major League Baseball came in and eliminated a lot of the lower level minor leagues, because Major League Baseball now runs all the minor leagues.
It was pretty cool that the Batavia had it was the smallest town in
Yep.
the world to have a pro team. It was pretty neat. And when I was running for office, I was like, we got to figure out a way to save this team. But listen, it's gone. Well, I'm glad it's still there in some capacity.
Yep.
But going back to you, okay. That's what that stadium is for, or supposed to be for, in Niagara Falls as well?
They now have a college team also there.
Okay.
It's
And
in the
who was
same
playing there before in the Penn League?
The Niagara Falls Rapids that
Yeah.
ironically were owned by Rich Baseball Operations when we finally got a team. But just ending the story real quick, I break the story that the team is for sale.
Right.
And that if they're not sold to a local person by that Thursday, we'd lose professional baseball.
You'd lose the Bisons.
Yep.
And what year is this?
1983.
So how'd you break the story?
I found out, that's what my source told me, that
Got it.
I got a hold of Mayor Griffin. He gave me some great quotes. They ran as a front page story.
And he loved the team and he wanted to keep it here.
He was the one that brought it here.
All right. So then who gets involved?
Turns out day two, the only local person who was involved, and he was off the record, was Bob Rich, and from Rich Products. I knew Bob, and I ended up, helping consult with him and wrote the story. And on Thursday, he made a passionate plea to the owners, and they sold him the team. And he became owner, and rather than me going to Rochester and taking a sports writing job, he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse, and I ended up working for the Bisons.
So let me explain this to people who may not know, because you think everyone knows this stuff. They don't. They know who the Bisons are if they live in Buffalo, but they don't know anything else. Rich Products is one of the biggest food companies in the world. It's right there on the river. When you're going to Buffalo, you're going to see the building. It's been there. I don't know how long that headquarters has been there, but it's been there for a while.
85 years.
They also have a building in Canada across the way, and I wonder how this whole tariff thing is affecting them. But they have a huge manufacturing facility in Canada. Rich Products is one of the biggest companies in Buffalo. In Asia, or nowadays, if you can see them in like New York City, you'll see these bakeries like Paris Baguette or Tous Les Jours or all these other like Korean bakeries. I'm pretty sure, actually I'm positive, Rich Products is the company that supplies many of the ingredients and other items that are eaten all over Asia as for bakeries and other food goods. So they're a huge, huge company. How the heck do you get to know Bob Rich, one of the richest people in America? How the heck did you even meet him?
I met him through, well, obviously everyone growing up here knows of the company, and I was at the Courier, and I had to cover the, they used to have these summer amateur games that state put on called the Empire State Games.
Right.
And I was at the Courier, and they said, write a story previewing it. And I'm looking at all these sports, and one was team handball.
Right.
And I had never heard of it. I thought handball, I played it in a little room with two people. I think.
Right.
And I see all these names on it and all these names with Rich, including Bob Rich Jr. and then former executive Dennis Gorski. And so I called Bob up and said, hey, I want to do a story. So I ended up doing that story and then covering them at the games. And we got to know each other. And then
I see.
When his dad turned 65, a few years after that, he asked me to write his dad's biography. And even though it was never published, we then published it in the year 2000. That was the first book
I read it. You gave me a copy of it. It's kind of amazing that you wrote the biography of the founder of Rich Products. And I think,
Correct.
from what I remember, I'm sorry, it's been a while. You gave it back when I was supervisor, but I think he became very wealthy off of non-dairy creamer.
Correct.
Right?
And the first non-dairy frozen whipped topping.
I mean, like, he cornered the market because there's a lot of people who were Jewish who needed that for their coffee, right?
Correct.
And it became like a global staple, and he built the company on that. That's right?
Yeah, and the interesting part, if you go back as an attorney, I think you'd get a kick out of reading the chapter about Coffee Rich, because that began...
Oh, yeah, there was a big lawsuit.
Yeah. No Buffalo attorney would take that case on, and he thought he was dead. And if he would have lost that, because he had so much money invested into it, they had hired Bob Hope to be the national spokesperson. He found a former governor of the state of Georgia, Ellis Arnold Gibbs, who took it on.
And what was the dispute exactly? There was a copyright dispute over the product, right?
Well, the dairy lobbies in every state,
Oh, that's right.
Led by California and Wisconsin, were arguing that it was artificial, and it was whereas dairy milk was a cow, and this was an artificial coffee whitener.
Yeah, I remember this.
And they ended up winning, the cases.
And we see this product everywhere still. So, and this is one of their many products. So anyway, so you become the guy at the Bisons, and he's hiring you to do press, right?
Yeah, it began first as, marketing, promotion, publicity, back at old War Memorial Stadium. And you talk about movies, the success of the team in 1983.
Oh, my goodness.
And then leading it to where it is today was due to two Bobs. And we would do this in public speaking, Bob Rich and Robert Redford. Because in May of that year, 1 month into our first season, Robert Redford and the movie The Natural selected Buffalo as the site to film The Natural.
So, yes, for those who don't know, suddenly Buffalo becomes the center of the baseball world. The Bisons become beloved. They film The Natural here, which is one of the greatest sports movies, one of the greatest movies ever made. Robert Redford comes. They use War Memorial Stadium as a backdrop for the New York Knights, as a replacement for the New York Knights, which is a fictitious team, correct? But many people in Buffalo go to the games and they act as extras. There is a vibe and an excitement in the city. This is what I always say, by the way, and I don't want to get too controversial, but I always end up doing this. I remember the early 80s. Buffalo had a vibe. And we think that it was dead then and now it's alive. No, it was alive in the early 80s. And I think the only reason why I say that is not to point a finger at people today. It's like, no, we need to wake up and really make the city our priority and do some type of regional development that embraces it. And
you should. And you know what, Nate? You're talking, and ironically, right behind you is what they did to build on that momentum. We're talking proud.
Yeah, listen, I remember it. And I've also talked to people, not just you. Since I ran for office, I became quite good friends with Talia Shire, the actress. Mm-hmm. She will go on for hours talking about how exciting Buffalo was during this period, and how she would come up from New York City because of the music scene that was here. And I just think it's a kind of a forgotten period, like with Spyro Gyra and the music, and of course Rick James. And there's just a whole vibe here in Western New York that was developing. And the city certainly was struggling. There was economic problems, but it still had a sense of identity that I just don't feel when I go to the city of Buffalo today. It seems very hollowed out. But anyway, there was an excitement for the city. People were proud of this movie. They were proud that it was made here. and then the Bisons go to a whole new level. And they build the stadium, and it becomes the pride of Buffalo. It still is an incredible stadium. I'm going to say that. I think seeing a baseball game at Pilot Field in Buffalo, which is now Salem Field, when you see a game there, that is true baseball. I mean, with the wind coming off the lake and the feeling that you're right in the city, that really is the heart of the city for me.
Well, and I appreciate that, and you're absolutely correct. There's two things here that I'll jump on what you talk about. Number one is anytime you want to go to a game, let me know. I have great seats on the third base line. And ironically, today we're filming this. It's April 14, and 37 years ago today is when we opened Pilot Field.
Wow. I did not know that. Wow.
The first of many, many sellouts in the first year of 6 straight seasons of a million-plus tickets sold. And that game, I think we had all 4 seasons of weather in one afternoon, and the Bisons won 1-0. Bob Patterson was the winning pitcher, and catcher Tom Prince hit a home run over the left field fence and to bring in the winning run.
So I saw so many games there. I saw so many concerts there, so many fireworks shows there. It's an incredible venue. I just love it. I think it's very all-American.
But you're absolutely right about the vibe of the city. I'm doing a lot. I agree with you going way back to your original statement about the east side of Buffalo. I've always I used to get my hair cut, and the fellow's still around. He's a dear friend of mine. Jerry Daniel Sr. He's 92 years old, and for about 10 years he would cut my hair at the Carl Jeff barbershop. And I walked in, and I met him, and I could tell everyone in there they're sitting around. They knew who I was, and I said, "Sir, do you cut white boys' hair?" And he said, "Well, I go by blood color, and right now we're working on red."
Oh, well,
so
listen.
He became one of my dearest friends, but. It always, to this day, and it still galls me, of the condition of, let's start with that street, Jefferson. Used to be a thriving street and business. But in the mid-'60s, there were the race riots across the country.
Right.
And young kids running up and down Jefferson with Molotov cocktails. Back then, the Cincinnati Reds were the AAA team of the Buffalo Bisons. And Buffalo lost its AAA team like 2 years after that because no one would go to the games anymore.
Well, obviously there's a lot of anger over the conditions in the city. And listen, I want to say to people in the city of Buffalo, like I am a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I believe broadly in the idea that government could be a force of good. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't believe that government is inherently evil. However, it's hard to look at the city of Buffalo and New York State and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to be siding with the Democrats. And listen, I will talk all day, and I often do, about the problems that are existing in the Republican Party right now. But when you have a city like the city of Buffalo that's on an international border that has this waterfront, and you have $50 million in debt, last couple of years ago, we had 50 people die in a snowstorm. Look at the numbers of how dangerous, that horrible that is. That is unacceptable. But we just kind of moved on. We just kind of pretended it didn't happen.
Yep.
And if you see these huge hurricanes and you're like 3 people died and they're like, oh, it's horrible. We had over 50 people die in one county. It's really unbelievable, unacceptable. There's no one ever held accountable. All this debt, all this corruption. How can you say, yeah, I'm down with the Democrats? And I understand that. And I think the city of Buffalo, especially there's this cognitive dissonance that happens, right? Because you look at the condition of Western New York or even New York State, and you're like, well, it's horrible, and they keep telling you, isn't Buffalo better than it ever has been? And I'm like, we lost 5,000 people last year. Again, we lose people every year. If any city is measured by anything, it should be the number of people that are leaving. Our little island here, since I was supervisor, has gained lots of people. People are trying to move here. It's a small measure of something, but I think it's very important. And I'm very angry at our leadership, and I can't hide it because I remember the when we almost got a Major League Baseball team. Let's talk about that. So the Buffalo Bisons are exploding. You're the head of press. It's like a super exciting time for you, and they're going to bring the Major League team here, right? That was what was suggested.
Well, Bob Rich, to his credit, when we first began in 1983, set 3 goals. Let's get from if the fans want it and they come out and support the team at a AA level, let's get from AA to AAA as quickly as we can. Let's work with Mayor Griffin on getting a downtown stadium built. And then let's bring Major League Baseball to Buffalo.
So they were doing it. They were right there. Build the stadium. It's sold out for 6 years in a row. Millions of people are visiting it, literally. And then what happens?
Well, I published another book called The Seasons of Buffalo Baseball, 1857 to 2020. And in 2020, we were literally on the presses getting printed. And in the chapter about Bob Rich, we talk about the 3 goals. And the writer of that story, Bud Bailey, wrote, well, he went 2 for 3, which in baseball is hitting .750, which ain't bad, on his goals. Well, ironically, that was the summer that the Toronto Blue Jays made Buffalo its home. So
for the summer?
Yeah, ended up for 2 summers.
Right.
So we had to go in and re-edit that page to say he did go 3 for 3 with an asterisk. We didn't own the Major League team, but Major League Baseball came to Buffalo, and it was
here a couple years ago too, during COVID, right?
That's when it came here.
Yeah,
hugely successful.
But
we lost it to 2 states, Colorado and Florida. And in the big picture of things, when Major League Baseball owners came here to inspect us, because we were in the final run of cities, and Bob had Pete Marwick had crunched numbers for us, and basically said, when Major League expands and we are one of those cities, will you have revenue sharing and salary cap? And they said no to both. So we put up another set of numbers, and there's no way this community could have afforded.
So basically the Riches that, as business people, said, you know what, we had a good thing going here. We cannot support a Major League Baseball team. That's what happened, right?
That's basically what it, we stayed in it. We fought and said, we'll do everything we can. But Major League Baseball also saw that. When you look at the sources of revenue, and this is the main reason the Bills stayed out in Orchard Park. When you look at now, at the county's dime, will be taking down the old stadium and making that a parking lot of, whatever they're going to charge for parking.
Right.
But all that room is all parking and
tailgating. They stayed. They went to Orchard Park because they can derive revenue. They can control more revenue. It's more of a captured environment.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean it's good for the city. And what I would have done. Can I tell you what I would have done? I'm just going to say I would have put it right by the Central Terminal. I would have turned the Central Terminal into a multi-purpose hotel and shopping area. I would have had viewing right over the stadium from the Central Terminal. I would have brought train lines into the Central Terminal. I would have made it more than a baseball stadium. I would have made it an event stadium, an event center for all of Western New York. It would have revitalized the West Side. It would have cured the wounds of moving the stadium out of the city of Buffalo, and it would have put Buffalo on the map. Literally, if you can't, you say, well, we could have never done these things. Well, I see these things being happening in China. Why couldn't we bring trains from Toronto? Buffalo, I was just in Toronto recently. There's Josh Allen jerseys everywhere. People would have come to the city of Buffalo. They're going to come to the Orchard Park to see it, but the only difference now is all the money, all the vision, all the future is in the hands of one family, the Pagulas. And it's tragic that none of our leaders, none of the council members, none of the mayor, none of these people fought for their city. And I listen, I don't want to dwell on that. I want to talk about you, but I think maybe my idea is stupid, but there could have been something to be done in the city of Buffalo. Or even, honestly, even the city of Niagara Falls. I believe we should have a regional perspective in Western New York. I believe that Niagara Falls and the city of Buffalo should be regionally managed because it doesn't make any sense. There's this division between the 2 counties that seems awkward, and it seems to take away emphasis from our greatest asset, which is the Falls. But we could talk about that another time.
Well,
so,
Mike, it's funny. That whole discussion we had brought up when you were supervisor, you had that, and I said, let's eliminate you're talking about the tourism. And I said, let's eliminate the Buffalo Tourism Division and the Niagara Falls one, close both of those operations, blow them up, and put one central Western New York tourism, and use that building that you brought to Grand Island the $20 or $30 million visitor center, make that the headquarters for tourism in Buffalo, Niagara Falls.
Well, it's packed every day, despite all the stories about what a waste of money it is. That thing is packed every single day. I see people there every day. It's a community center. It serves many purposes. I just think, look at it. I didn't live here for a long time. I left the region. And I know that nobody knows what the city of Buffalo is outside of New York State, really. I mean, because they know the Buffalo Bills, maybe. Everybody in the entire world knows Niagara Falls. I tell people this and they don't believe me, and I say, go look it up. It is a bigger tour destination than the Great Wall of China. It is the biggest tourist destination, and arguably in the entire world. More people go see Niagara Falls than the Eiffel Tower. But in Western New York, for some reason, if I read the Buffalo News, it seems like Glen Falls is more important. It's like this local parochialism that they're like, listen, we don't want to really share anything with Niagara Falls because of these municipality differences. So let's break down those differences and make things shared and make a vision for the entire community that we can build off of. I think that tourism is an undertapped resource here.
Oh, well, maybe that's a position we'll run you for, is to eliminate those tourism boards, make one central one. But when your buddy Andy was the governor of New York, I commended him and criticized him.
Yep.
On the issue of, I don't know how many billions of dollars or whatever was spent on renovating or building new train terminals from New York City to Niagara Falls, which I complimented.
Yes.
I complimented that from the standpoint that this is great for the entire state by having now an emphasis on trains. You go to Europe, like you were talking about, there's trains that take you all over the place, and they're gorgeous. It's a wonderful way of transportation. My criticism was I fought like heck when they were going to come to Buffalo and either renovate the Central Terminal or the Exchange Street station. And I fought like heck to go and renovate the old Central Terminal, forget about the Exchange Street, close Depew, and just have the Central Terminal as the main train headquarters here. Bus people from there into the city would force you to clean up Sycamore, Broadway, and those streets. But the problem was that the governor and the mayor heard what I heard was the Bills owner, Pagulas at the time, were still thinking of putting a stadium in the Perry projects.
Is that what happened?
And they wanted that to be the hub for the trains from Toronto. Whereas I said, forget it. Go out to the Central Terminal.
The Central
NFTA
Terminal.
Sell the building, put all the buses there, put their headquarters in there.
Central Terminal, listen, our congressperson who brags about that Exchange Street station, that Exchange Street station is a joke. There's nobody there. And nobody even knows where it is. So we have this beautiful station in the city of Niagara Falls. Beautiful, right? And then we have this station in the city of Buffalo. It's brand new, but there's nobody there. It's okay, but like they built it underneath an underpass for some reason. And when you have this giant, beautiful station, the Central Terminal going unused, and they're trying to turn it into an art center now, and more power to them to make it into something. But it could have been something. Like I said, it should have been where the Bills Stadium is. It could have been an incredible asset to the stadium. You can't make buildings like that anymore. That is like, it's like having something like the Eiffel Tower in your hometown and just saying, hey, you know what? We're going to go over here and build a strip mall instead. So okay. Sorry to go all over the place. I know you got to go in a second. Are you okay on time? Can I go a little farther?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because it's fun to talk to you, and I'm obviously going all over the place. We have to have you back. So the next thing I want to say is, so they choose not to do the stadium, or excuse me, they choose not to actively or aggressively pursue having a
Major League Baseball
expansion team, right?
It goes to 2 other cities, but the fans here appreciated what we did and the Riches did, and they came back out, and we drew 1 million fans the next 2 years after that.
Yeah, people loved it still. And so
it's still, at 37 years later, it's still a great ballpark.
It's
there
great.
Yesterday. Wish it would warm up a little more, but it's wonderful to watch these future major leaguers.
Nothing like sitting out there in the summertime and having a hot dog and feeling that breeze come off the lake. And, it's a wonderful experience.
So really what ended my career at the Bisons was probably going to be your next question.
Yeah.
So I was in a...
let me set it up. I want to talk about it. So you're at the top of your life, right? You're in Buffalo, and you love the city, and you're contributing to the city every day, and you're part of baseball. You love sports. You're working with somebody you respect, and the Rich family and Bob Rich, and you're out biking, and you have a tragic accident, correct?
Yes.
And what happened?
It's just a whole series of miracles, and my spirituality and my family's power of prayer saved my life, and there's no...
So you were hit on your bicycle, right?
I was in
Where
Canada.
were you? Yeah.
Had a place on Point Avenue Road, and it really began the month before that when I bought a new bicycle, 10-speed, and the owner knew that I would ride at night after the Bison games just to, wind down a little bit. I lived down in Allentown. I'd ride around the city, till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And he said, if you ever hit a pothole and hit your head, we can't afford to lose you. So he wanted to sell me a bike helmet. And I'm saying, I'm not going to spend another $100. So he throws it at me, and I wore it. And I was the only one in my crew wearing a bike helmet.
So you'd go over the bridge?
No, I rented a place up there, and I had my bike there.
Oh, so you're by Crystal Beach or something? Is that where you were?
A few miles away from there.
Okay.
So I'm leaving the house, and I remember reading the phone number of where my brother was going to be that day because he's coming up for dinner. And I get on my bike, and there's no bike helmet on my handlebars. And I figure, well, I must have brought it home. It's after Labor Day. So I'm on the bike, and a voice says, get your bike helmet. So I get off my bike, go in the garage, looking around. As I'm leaving, there's a box by the door. Open the box, I'll go to my grave, never knowing how that bike helmet got in there. And the next time I saw the bike helmet was 4 days later at ECMC.
So they took you from Canada to ECMC?
A whole series of miracles. They were taking me. I had no ID on me. So I'm being taken as a John Doe to the hospital in Fort Erie.
So who hit you? Where were they?
It was a drunken Canadian customs guy driving 60 miles an hour down Michener Road, hits me from behind. I went ass first into his windshield. Ugh. He hit the gas, threw me all the way down the road, and I went sliding in my back into a metal Toronto Sun news box. And the hit was so hard that the fiberglass on the inside of the helmet was shattered, and the plastic helmet went into my head, caused a gash and bleeding. But that was the least of the injuries. My right shoulder was separated, my right wrist was fractured, my left ankle, he drove over it, was fractured. Tips of my vertebrae were all fractured.
So how old were you at this time?
It was 82, 37.
So you're at the prime of your life. You have this horrible injury, and you barely survive. And I'm just going to be open about it. And if I say anything I have nothing but respect for you, so please do not take anything I say as offensive. You caused brain damage, right? You had some cognitive issues for a while, and it took a long time for you to... So you're like this brilliant writer and smart guy in advertising, pushing these ideas, writing books, and it took a long time for you to get back, didn't it?
It really did, and like a fool, I didn't listen to the doctor and follow. He said, take all of 1993 off, and I'm like, well, who's going to run the Bisons? So I didn't. I figured I had 3 different physical therapy scripts. I said, well, if I double them up, I'll cut the recovery time in half. And like an idiot, I went back to work, and I was half of me, and literally size, mind, the whole thing. But what happened was I was going through these periods that I didn't even know what depression was back then.
Right.
But I was experiencing it.
It's so, like, just in the interest of time, there's a lot we can talk about, but you became extremely depressed, and it was a decades-long battle, and I understand this. Like, I think one of the things we've talked about before, and I think is very true, is that we talk about physical injuries very openly without any moral judgment, but we do not talk about brain problems, mental issues openly.
Well, there you just hit the word, is that they, I didn't listen to a doctor. They said, if you don't take the year off, you'll pay a serious price, and I did. I had a near nervous breakdown, a couple years later, and went through all kinds of neurology tests, and so those tests based on, along with my behaviors, I was sent to a psychiatrist, and he said, oh, no big deal. He said, we've got some medication, you'll be fine. I said, well, what do I have? And he said, well, it's a bipolar disorder. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, it's a mental illness. And when he said mental, I didn't hear another word. I'm saying in my mind, there's no way in the world I'm telling anyone
Right.
I have a mental anything.
Because of the stigma involved. And
Only because I didn't even know what stigma meant back then. I just went back to when I was a kid, growing up, single-digit age, walking down Lincoln Boulevard in Kenmore, and parents, neighbors, everyone pointed to 121 Lincoln on the second floor. Jimmy lived there, and he was a mental retard.
Okay.
And you don't want to be around Jimmy. So we had a fear and a knowledge back then that mental retard meant you stay away from that person. We literally would cross the street.
As if it's contagious or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's going to attack us.
So you
that?
You felt like you were depressed because you were this large, handsome, tall guy who suddenly is struggling, and you're feeling depressed and you don't understand it. And back in the 80s, there's no real resources to understand it. And it's so incredibly stigmatized. I don't think young people listening to this realize how stigmatized mental health was before. When I was a kid, even, you couldn't tell someone you were depressed. Being depressed was a sign of weakness.
Yep.
It was a sign of you're a loser. You're not able to cope. And so you from a different generation, and you have this masculine family, and you're like, from this family, it was business people, and they were always getting things done. And suddenly you're like, I'm depressed. So how did you deal with it?
I called it managed depression, but I have a good friend, that I would talk to every day, and he had OCD, which is also under that umbrella. And we would try to motivate each other every day. And when I would be in these dark holes where all you wanted to do was sleep, I'd still work. I still had a job, but I called it managed depression. But what was missing was I didn't have any enthusiasm.
Your zest.
Yeah, I had none of that.
But when I met you, I met you as a supervisor, and this is my impression. I thought, this guy's fun. He's full of energy. He's exciting. He doesn't judge me. I'm going to say this. He didn't judge me for being a Democrat, which a lot of people always did when I was on the island as a supervisor. They thought I was some kind of wacko. You just were very supportive. You're like this. You looked at me objectively and said, this is a good idea. Let's do this. Let's do that. And one of the things I fought for was the bike trail, right? And it's you can go outside right now and see all the people using it. It's very successful. But you were a huge advocate. You said this is a good idea. Was that partially because you had this bike injury?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, you saw me in the, as I said, I call it managed depression, and I was able to manage it.
So you were masking it.
Yeah.
But got to...
No, I was in the up at that point.
Okay.
I was out of the hole.
Right.
And when I would go in the hole, and my buddy Sammy measured it, and I could tell by my journaling of when I was out, and really for a number of years, I was in the hole about 6 months of the 12 months.
And so if you don't want to talk about something, tell me. But that means when you're in the hole, it means you don't want to get up, you don't want to go out, you don't want to talk to people. What does that mean?
All of that. Luckily, I was strong enough to get up and get out. But I consider all of this from a spiritual standpoint, that the Lord has given me the opportunity now to literally walk the talk of all the people that have suffered, that I could say, I've been there. I drank alcohol. I haven't drank in 29 years.
Oh, so did you start drinking heavily when you got depressed from your injury?
No, I wasn't drinking at that point.
Okay, so you haven't any alcohol in how long?
29 years.
And so that's also been something you've overcome.
Yep.
So
that was easy. I just stopped, and a lot of it had to do with after the accident and all that. I realized, that drinking really didn't do anything positive for me. So and that I have an addictive personality. I mean, I was never in a DWI or never in any rehab or anything, but it allowed me to stop, and now I'm an advocate for those that are suffering, and I'm able to help them along.
Well, as a non-drinker, I find it when I find someone who doesn't drink, I find I'm relieved. Listen. If you guys drink, whatever, it's your life. Make your choices. I'm not judging you, but for me, I think I don't drink, and I think it allows me to enjoy life more. I'm more high on life. Little things make me happy. Board games, going for a walk, playing basketball with my kids. I don't need that extra high. Is that how you feel?
Without a doubt. Number one. And number two, I don't know how these people can afford to drink today. I go into these bars and I see what they're spending, on a glass of wine, $15, $20. I'm like, what?
I do think that when I was more in my legal career, I think it cost me opportunities. I hate to say that because for some reason, people don't trust other people unless they drink. If you're a drinker, if you're not a drinker, they don't trust you. And I used to be like, I don't care, go ahead and drink. And they would look, but you're not drinking?
Right.
As if I was somehow going to rat them out or something. And I was like, no, I just don't drink. And there was always be a stigma about that. And I'm glad it's sort of changing. I see more and more people are moving away from alcohol.
Yep.
Sorry, back to you. So there was a point where you became suicidal, if I could say. Is that okay to talk about?
Yeah, what happened during that whole time, I mean, I was still, as you saw, on my game and all that. I ended up meeting Debbie and we got married.
Right. And you were super happy.
18
and you had
years, yeah, we had a great time. But she, about 10 years ago, she had a stop at Walgreens on the island. I said, hey, do me a favor, pick up my meds and I'll, pay it when we get home. So we get home and she gives me the bill. I pay her. She goes, you're wasting your money. You're fine. You don't need this. You don't need to pay the doctor each month. And Debbie was a CFO and, she loved to look at ways of, saving, a few bucks. And I said, no, so then I listened to her. And I remember telling these doctors, because the problem that they have with antidepressants is that it isn't like when you have a flu, when they give you a Z-Pack and you're out of it in, 5 days, you're feeling better. Here, it could be a couple months before it kicks in and you have a positive effect from it. And I said, well, what happens if you don't? Well, then we'll put you on something else. So another 2 months, and I'm like, I didn't like that whole process. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to quit.
Do you think, I have family members who have mental illness or mental issues they're dealing with, and it seems to me, this is my opinion, I want to hear what you think. I think we know so little about the mind still, and we're struggling to understand it. And I do believe some of the people I know who've taken medicines, their personality was profoundly affected by it.
Without a doubt.
And sometimes in a negative
Especially
way.
kids.
Right. And then I'm worried about it because, I'm worried about, sometimes people say to me, should I take this? And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't want you to change. Yeah. Am I wrong to think that?
No, absolutely not. In fact, I'm writing a book. It's been 10 years in the making, and now I'm going to make sure it's done this year, called My Miracle, How the Power of Prayer Saved My Life. And it talks about those whole experiences. And a doctor that I am definitely going to meet, and I am a huge advocate of, and I would strongly recommend you or your family look into it, is Dr. Daniel Amen, A-M-E-N. He's a psychiatrist, but he has now mastered the art of brain health.
Okay.
And
through with cognitive therapy or what?
As simple as what you're eating.
Okay.
Mind exercises and it's all about, and this is where he criticizes his own profession of psychiatry, is it's the only doctor that, will prescribe without really digging in and looking at what's wrong.
I believe, obviously, I believe in science and I believe in medical science. I believe in pharmaceuticals, but I do see with, especially one family member I have, that it almost seems like they're always trying to fix the last drug.
Yep.
And they're in this cycle of okay, I took this and this made me feel bad this way, so I'm taking this. And it's like we're 25 years into it.
It's called the alphabet super drug.
And I'm like, I don't even know where the original, person is anymore.
But here's the problem is I listened to Debbie and I stopped.
Okay.
And what happens, what I learned is if you have a diagnosis of depression, which I do, and it's unmanaged, meaning there's no meds, you're not seeing anyone and all that, and you get into the dark hole. The final form in that dark hole is suicide. And so I was working at the time, and someone said something to me that triggered a reaction of, really, that's what you think? And I left that place of employment, got in my car, and drove to the New York State Thruway right near the Hamburg exit, got out, opened the front hood to basically say, if a cop came, I'd have car trouble. Took a baseball cap and said, all right, God, the next semi that comes by, we'll see who wins. I was going to throw the hat in the road and go after it.
Wow.
And I saw one way down the road. All of a sudden, out of the side of my eye, I see a truck from where I worked pull up, and the driver recognized me in my car, and he got out, said, Mike, you got car trouble?
Wow.
And I looked up and said, all right, God, now what? And he then said, use the tools I gave you to help end the stigmas of mental health. And that's what I'm doing through this book. I then called Jody LeMayo, who ran Kaleida Health, and said, if you don't find me the best brain doctor in the world, I'm done promoting ECMC. And how is it that ECMC had just hired a brain trauma expert from Strong Memorial, who basically saved my life twice at ECMC.
So you feel better nowadays, right?
Oh, without it, he looked at everything, looked at all my records, and said, well, he said, the good news is you were misdiagnosed. You don't have a bipolar disorder. You have a traumatic brain injury. And if you follow these 6 steps, you'll live a life you never dreamed.
And what are those steps?
Very simple. He said, you'll have a more easy to take Medicaid, but you got to take your meds every day.
Right.
You got to eat clean.
Right.
You've got to exercise and walk at least 30 minutes a day.
Right.
You've got to manage your stress, sleep 6 to 8 hours a day, and in your case, I'll add number 6, continue to pray. And I said, well, isn't that a license for everybody? He said, it is, but for you, you've got to go 6 for 6 every day to live a life you never dreamed.
So for me, I'll tell you what keeps me on track. And I everyone can go through bouts of depression. Bad things happen. I think that, and some of the stuff is real. You should feel sad if you've done something wrong. You should feel bad if you hurt somebody. And sometimes you have to go through that natural process. But if you're getting up every single morning and you're not happy and you hate your life, you need help, right? I mean, I like to get up and be happy. I think nowadays I feel really happy because I'm trying to take good care of myself. I'm eating better. I've always been a guy that's really into exercise, and I really believe in the power of exercise. But I think it's also, for me, it's like I put time into the spiritual side of myself, like you said, which also means connecting with my children and spending time with them, looking them in the eye and say, I love you, and I care for you, and connecting to the animals in my life, the little dogs and stuff. I think that stuff really is important. But I think prayer for me too, I'm not saying that everybody has to pray, but I'm just saying, for me, praying on a daily basis and saying thank you to God is really beneficial.
Yeah, AA has a way of calling it. It's not a spiritual person, but they refer to it's the God of your understanding, your higher power.
Got it.
They refer to it 4 times in their 12 steps. So yeah, for me, I mean, I'm pretty open with my spirituality and my, I consider myself a Christian. I'll always, be a Catholic, but it isn't what you practice where you go. It's who you, and prayer is nothing more than a daily, constant conversation with the God of your understanding. And if you don't believe that He's, setting your pace, then you've got some real issues. But if you turn it over to Him and you really have that belief that someone is there helping you, you'll live a great life. And as this doctor told me, he said, if you follow this and go 6 for 6, and if you miss, come back the next day, you'll live a life you never dreamed. I'm walking out there saying, does he realize what I just tried to do to myself a couple of days ago?
Wow.
But I did it for the 2-week period till I saw him again and never felt better. And I've been on it ever since. And Nate, I'm doing stuff today. I'll be 70 in June 27. and I feel 30, 40 years younger than 30.
I think you look better than you have since I first met you.
I've never in my life felt better, been better, and been more focused on objectives. And the objectives are, what I'm doing career-wise, but also what I'm doing for the community. And here on Grand Island, a stance that me and two other guys are taking is going up against the town board and forcing them to do something with that no-show, out-of-town owner of the greatest eyesore in any community, the Grand Island Plaza.
Listen, I got to talk about that. Okay, so by the way, folks, if you don't want to hear about Grand Island local issues, tune out now. But we're going to talk.
But before you get into that, on Grand
ahead.
Island, I'd like to make a motion that we put some type of plaque up on this beautiful, trail here on the West River, and also the tolls, the no tolls on the Grand Island Bridge, and put a huge thank you to you, because if it wasn't for your dogged attention to those two positives, they would have never happened.
Well, thank you. I don't need the recognition, but I will say this: it does make me sad.
And the visitor center is here because of that,
and the scenic woods trail,
yep.
And also the open Holiday Inn Express, which was closed for 50 years. We did so many things, not just me. There was a community vibe, and I was talking to somebody on the island who sells merchandise, and they said when you were a supervisor, I could not keep Grand Island related merchandise in stock, and I can't sell it. I can give it away now, and I'm like, that makes me really sad. And I listen, and I'm not saying I'm the end all be all of the world, but I just think we had a really good vibe going then. I will say this, though. I don't think there's a chance in heck I could ever get elected again on Grand Island, because unfortunately, the state of politics is if you get stuff done, people hate you. And there's something wrong with our system. If you hide in your closet, wait for things to happen, and then try to take credit for it, you could stay in office forever. But if you actually go and say, no, we're going to do this, I'm going to take a stand, there really isn't a place for you in modern politics. I really believe that because I saw it firsthand. Because you cannot put my record up against anybody else. No way. But nonetheless, I still am in the supermarket and people still yell at me. And I'm like, well, first of all, I wasn't responsible for that. Or they try to take credit away from things we did.
Yep.
And it drives me crazy. What do you think that says about the state of politics in America?
Oh, it's, we're not going to be here all day.
Yeah, okay. So, but I will say this: I was very proud of what we did as supervisor. What I would like to see happen to that center. And thank you for your kind words, by the way. And I
mean them.
I have nothing but fond memories of you either, and working together. And we got to figure a way now that we've reconnected to work together again on stuff, because I think there's a lot of good we could do in Western New York if you have courage and you're willing to do it. And it's not like the people on the town board I don't like. I don't even know them. I mean, I know the supervisor's a nice guy. He's just, I don't know, he's just different than me. His way of doing things is different. I wish he would stick his neck out and realize.
Yep.
When I first became supervisor, I remember I didn't think I was going to be supervisor. And I remember what this Jim Sharp said, well, you can't, there's something I wanted to do. And he's like, you can't do that. And I said, I love Jim, by the way. I'm not trying to.
And I love Jim also.
I'm not trying to be negative to Jim, but Jim was more cautious. And he said, Nate, you can't do that. And I said, Jim, he's like, you'll never be supervisor again if you go for that position. It was the West River Trail, I'll just say it. And I said, Jim, it's the right thing to do. I go, what's the purpose of being supervisor if I'm just going to sit here and not do anything? I don't really want to be supervisor forever. I want to get the trail done. And he's like, all right, look, you're going to lose. And the truth, to his word, some of these people out here still hate me, even if they use the trail every day. So but I want to say this to the town board. We had a deal to redevelop the plaza. A company was going to come give us millions of dollars. All we had to do was agree to build part of it as a community center to be the anchor tenant of the plaza. It was a golden deal. They were happy to do it, but the town board wouldn't even look at the deal. We had so many deals to do a community center in Grand Island, but at that point, people were like, you've done too much, Nate. We're not doing this. Also, the Canada Design Building. That was,
yep.
They put me through hell over that. We had a golden deal to buy it. The ownership was super delighted to give it to the town, almost at cost. And the town did, they dragged their feet, made it impossible for us to buy. But that central area, that plaza, is in a complete disaster and eyesore. Someone in the town, listen, if there was appetite to develop it years ago, there certainly is appetite now. The town is doing well. Why isn't anything being done? Now, go ahead, you can speak on this.
Good question. They I've always, and this was something Debbie, when she was on that long range committee, would bring up to Jim Sharp. Why can't we do anything here? And it was, well, it's privately owned, and he's this and that, and he's from Arizona.
He wanted to sell. I'm going to tell you right now, I talked to the guy on the phone. He wanted to sell. There was developers that wanted to sell it. There wasn't an appetite in the town to do it.
But here's a problem with his sale, is a few years ago, I had someone who was interested in buying. And so I reached out. I called that number that's right on the billboard there.
Right.
And he gave me, I think the number then was like $4.2 million. And my friend said, fine, let's get the paperwork going. He says, I'll buy it for that much.
Right.
And so I called him up and I said, all right, Tom, we've got a deal. And he said, well, what number did you give him? I said, the one you gave me, 4.2. He said, no, I want 4.6. And that was his MO. He's
certainly difficult to deal with. The guy is difficult to deal with, but where's the appetite in the town to do something? You've complained about the conditions at the plaza for several times now. Well, how's the response been?
No, it's been horrible. We went in, and what got me going this time is, number one, I bank at M&T. So I'm in that
right across the street. Yeah, right there.
It's right there. It's the anchor tenant there.
Right.
And they've got a long-term lease or...
and they're not happy with the condition there either, by the way.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I'm walking in and I'm looking down. I don't really look up, and I hear this crash behind me. And I look, and there's a piece of plywood right on the ground. And I look up, and the corner of the canopy is all broken, cracked into. And I talked to the manager. It turns out a Dollar General that's right next door, their truck backed into it. So in addition to the driveway hardly ever being plowed, no salt, people, are
huge holes in it.
Accident waiting to be happen. Your car's going to get ruined. Now you got this, falling apart, and they have wood over on the side with nails hanging. I'm like, wait a minute, this is crazy.
So at the very least, if the town doesn't have, it doesn't seem the town has anybody that's going to go out there and chase deals and has a vision, but at the very least, you should be in charge of making sure that code enforcement is followed. I know certain properties in the island get absolutely hammered every day. Why is this guy allowed to operate the plaza like that?
Well, I said from way back to Jim Sharp and the others and the previous supervisor, I said, just go and code enforcement, and I deal with code enforcement through the Erie County Clerk Zombies Initiative. I know these guys. They're very well-educated, individuals. I said, there's all kinds of violations. I'm sure if you take a look at the place, just paper the heck out of them and force them into court. And the excuse I got from the code enforcement, well, we have a P.O. box and we can't,
Yeah, but essentially the argument is they can't get a hold of him, which that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
but
here was the issue here now. So now I reach out, I put a letter with the photos, and we went on social media, on the two Grand Island social media sites, got hundreds of comments.
Right.
And then one of our Grand Island Rotary members went and he started a petition drive. And that now has over 250 signatures, and he's going to resurrect that again today as an update, because we're not done. We're going to go in front of the town board and demand action.
Well, good for you. Can I go on I hope all power to you, and I'm glad to get some of the word out there on this show. Can I tell you something funny about those Grand Island sites? Listen. I started a Grand Island Facebook page. Okay, it still exists. It's in dormant mode, and I'll tell you why. So it was very popular, and then it was the first one of its kind, and people loved it. And then there was a response to it called Grander Ideas for Grand Island.
Right.
So there was originally a Grand Ideas for Grand Island, and then came Grander. Now there's Grandist. So there's these two sites for the island, and the one that we had, the town board made a motion saying I wasn't allowed to use it anymore as supervisor. They said it was inappropriate. They said so I didn't want to fight them and go to court over it, so I just turned it off. I mean, I said I would turn it off until I left being supervisor. It's still there if I ever want to re-kick it up, but I just think it's funny. Well, I'm glad you're pushing hard on this. Anything you want me to do right now?
Just keep doing what you're doing, and let's definitely get together and let's try to make some positive change.
Let's do a podcast with, if we can, with me, you, and Sharp right here.
That
would be fun to talk all issues Grand Island one day.
Wow.
That'd be fun.
We'll get some publicity. I got to figure out how to watch this. And,
listen, it doesn't get that many views on YouTube yet because it's kind of new, but it gets a lot of views on Facebook and a lot of downloads on the podcast format. So I'll show it to you. I'm just going to play a little. Can you hear that music? A little music.
Exit music.
A little exit music. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Now, who am I?
You're Mike Billoni.
There we are.
Thank you so much. Take care.